Welcome to my CBSE English teacher. Today let's look at the final part of the line by line explanation of the chapter Deep Water from class 12 English. If you are watching my video for the first time, please subscribe. You can listen to the explanations of chapters from classes 10, 11 and 12 English. And don't forget to press the bell icon so that you get notified whenever I upload a video. Let's move on to the video now. So even after a few years of the misadventure, he still was frightened whenever he saw water. Even when he had gone for bathing in some of the lakes, he felt the fear coming back. So let's continue the lesson. This handicap stayed with me as the years rolled by. This handicap, what is he calling as handicap? What is handicap? Some kind of disability. So here he is calling his fear of water as a handicap because he was not able to indulge in any kind of water activities. So he is calling this as a handicap. So this handicap stayed with me as the years rolled by. So for many years he had this fear of water. In canoes on main lakes fishing for landlocked salmon, bass fishing in New Hampshire, trout fishing on the Deschutes and Metolius in Oregon, fishing for salmon on the Columbia, at Bumping Lake in the Cascades. Wherever I went, the haunting fear of the water followed me. So he's saying that for all kinds of water activities, whether it is canoeing or fishing at these different lakes that he has named here, so he was not able to do anything or enjoy anything because this haunting fear of the water followed him everywhere. So landlocked salmon, bass and trout are all different kinds of fish found in these lakes where he used to try to go fishing along with his friends. It ruined my fishing trips. So he is saying that this fear of water ruined means destroyed his fishing trips. He was not able to enjoy fishing along with his friends. Deprived me of the joy of canoeing. So he was not able to enjoy the happiness of canoeing. Canoeing is also a kind of a boat. So he was not able to go for canoeing or boating or swimming along with his friends. I used every way I knew to overcome this fear, but it held me firmly in its grip. So he's saying that he tried to do everything and to remove this fear from his mind, but then the fear was that always overpowered him. Finally, one October, I decided to get an instructor and learn to swim. So because of this fear of water, it had some long-term effects on him. What is that? Whenever he looked at water, he used to get frightened. And then next is he could not enjoy any kind of water activities at all. So because of that, he decided finally in October that he would keep an instructor and learn to swim so that he could get rid of the fear of water. I went to a pool and practiced 5 days a week, an hour each day. The instructor put a belt around me. So finally he was able to keep an instructor to teach him, and he used to practice for 5 days a week, and every day he used to spend 1 hour in the for the practice. And the instructor put a belt around me. And how did the instructor teach him? He used to put a belt around him and hold it at one end. So a rope was attached to the belt and went through a pulley that ran overhead cable. So he used to have a rope, a belt that used to be tied over his waist, and it used to be tied to a rope, and this rope would go across a pulley that was tied overhead, and he held on to the end of the rope, and we went back and forth across the pool, hour after hour, day after day, week after week. So what happened? One end of the belt is tied to the waist of the narrator, and the other end it goes through a pulley and then is held by the instructor. So he used to hold one end, and this narrator used to swim back and forth. That means he used to go to one side and come back. So this used to be done for many times, hour after hour. So we know that he had practiced for 5 days a week and spent 1 hour every day. So like that for weeks and weeks he started practicing. On each trip across the pool, a bit of panic seized me. So whenever he tried to go across the pool, he's saying a bit of the panic means fear, seized me. So the fear of water always came back whenever he tried to swim in that swimming pool. So each time the instructor relaxed his hold on the rope and I went under, some old terror returned and my legs froze. So what happens, sometimes the instructor would loosen his grip and that time the narrator would go under the water. And when he went under the water, what happened? That old fear came back and then his legs would freeze. That means he was not able to move, in a proper manner. It was 3 months before the tension began to slack. So it took at least 3 months for him to lessen the amount of fear that he had and he was able to learn swimming. Then he taught me to put my face under water and exhale and to raise my nose and inhale. So he taught him all the dynamics of swimming. That is how when you have to exhale, you have to go. What is exhale? Leave the air out through your nose. So when you have to exhale, you have to go underwater. And when you have to inhale, you have to come out. So all these tactics he was teaching him. I repeated the exercise hundreds of times. So in order to practice, he says that he did this hundreds of times. Bit by bit, I shed part of the panic that seized me when my head went under water. So he's saying, when I learned these tricks slowly, I was able to let go the fear and I was able to go under water. Next, he held me at the side of the pool and had me kick with my legs. So what did the instructor do next? First, he taught him how to breathe and breathe inside water and come out and all that. He taught him how to exhale and inhale. Now what did he do? He took him to the side of the pool and held him tightly and taught him how to kick with the legs. For weeks I did just that. So he said that he practiced this technique for weeks together. At first my legs refused to work. Again he says that his legs were not supporting him while trying to practice this. But they gradually relaxed and finally I could command them. But he says that slowly he was able to do what he wanted to, that is, kick with his legs in a strong manner. Thus, piece by piece, he built a swimmer. So he's saying slowly and very steadily, the instructor was able to build a very good swimmer out of me. And when he had perfected each piece, he put them together in an integrated whole. That means he taught him all kinds of tactics that needs to be a swimmer needs to know. He taught him how to inhale and exhale. He taught him how to beat the legs. Then he also taught him other different kinds of strokes. And so put together, finally, he was able to build a perfect swimmer, or he was able to make the narrator a perfect swimmer. In April, he said, "Now you can swim. Dive off and swim the length of the pool, crawl stroke." So after making him a perfect swimmer, then one day he told him, that was in April, he told him that now you can go and swim, dive off into the length of the pool. That means dive means, from a elevated place you have to jump into the water. So he asked him to dive into a pool and use the crawl stroke. Now crawl stroke is one of the different kinds of strokes the swimmer use, and it is supposed to be the fastest and most efficient stroke. I did. And he says that he listened to his instructor and he was able to do it. The instructor was finished. That means his job was over because he was able to make a perfect swimmer out of the narrator. But I was not finished. But he says that my job was not over. So what was his job and what was his goal? His goal was to remove the fear completely. So he says that that was still not over. I still wondered if I would be terror stricken when I was alone in the pool. So he still had his own doubts. He wanted to know whether his fear would come back, especially when he was alone inside a pool. I tried it. So what did I try? What did the narrator try? Going to a pool alone. I swam the length up and down. So with great energy and all enthusiasm, he swam up and down the lake. Tiny vestiges of the old terror would return. What is tiny vestiges? Small pieces of fear. So here and there slightly he would get frightened thinking about the experience he had. But now I could frown and say to terror, "Trying to scare me, eh? Well, here's to you, look." So he says that When the fear would return, he would boldly try to speak to terror itself, telling that, "See, look here, are you trying to scare me? See what I can do to you." So he was trying to challenge fear itself, and he spoke to the fear and he tried to drive it away. And off I'd go for another length of the pool. And so, thus speaking and trying to frighten fear itself, he would tell fear that I will see what I'm going to do, and he would jump off into the pool. This went on until July. So he says that he tried to do this all alone. He would go to the pool and try to jump into the pool and swim and try to push off the fear whichever came back. But I was still not satisfied. I was not sure that all the terror had left. So he says that he was still not satisfied because even then, sometimes the terror would come back at times. So I went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire, dived off a dock at Triggs Island, and swam 2 miles across the lake to Stamp Act Island. So he says he went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire and dived off a dock. Dock means a raised area at Triggs Island and swam 2 miles. So he swam for 2 miles and he reached the Stamp Act Island. I swam the crawl, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke. So, using all kinds of strokes, he swam these 2 miles. Only once did the terror return. So, he says that only at one point of time there was slight terror. When I was in the middle of the lake, I put my face under and saw nothing but bottomless water. So he was daring enough. What did he do when he was in the middle of the lake? He just put his head under the water and he was able to see only water and nothing less. The old sensation returned in miniature. So when he put his head under water, he says that he could see only water, and he says that the old sensation, what is the old sensation? That fear of water, fear of drowning and all that. So he says that it returned in miniature. That means in a small amount, very small amount. I laughed and said, "Well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me?" So he's saying that he wanted to face that terror very boldly, and he spoke to terror itself. He said, "What can you do to me?" So he just tried to talk to it and drive it away. It fled and I swam on. So as he spoke, what happened? The fear in him just vanished and he was able to swim across. Yet I had residual doubts. So he still had some doubts whether the fear of water would come back. At my first opportunity, I hurried west, went up the Teton to Conrad Meadows, up the Conrad Creek Trail to Mead Glacier, and camped in the high meadow by the side of the warm lake. So again he wanted to test whether his fear would come back. So he went to different water bodies and finally he camped at the meadow at the side of the warm lake. The next morning, I stripped, dived into the lake, and swam across to the other shore and back, just as Duke Corcoran used to do. So he's saying that he had camped at the meadow there, and so next day morning he wanted to swim again. So he stripped, removed his clothes, and dived into the lake and swam across to the other shore. So he went to the other river bank, that is the shore, and again he came back, just as Duke Corcoran used to do. Who is this Duke Corcoran? He is also one of the swimmers who used to go up and come back. He used to go back and forth the lake. So he also tried to imitate him. I shouted with joy and Gilbert Peak returned the echo. So when he went across and came back, he understood that no fear remained at all. So he had completely conquered the fear of water. So he was elated, he was so happy, and he shouted with joy. And when he shouted, what happened? He was at the Gilbert Peak. He could hear the echo. His sound was returned. I had conquered my fear of water. So he says that his fear of water had been completely conquered. The experience had deep meaning for me, as only those who have known stark terror and conquered it can appreciate. So he's saying that that moment was very great and it had a great meaning for him. Which moment is he talking about? The moment he says that he has conquered the fear of water. He says it is very meaningful for him because it is he is the person who had really known what is stark terror and how he had conquered it. So he had a personal experience of fear, and so he says that now he was able to conquer it. So that is why the conquering of the terror that he had, he was able to appreciate that. In death there is peace. So he's saying that if you die means there is peace, you don't have to bother about anything, you will be peaceful. There is terror only in the fear of death, as Roosevelt knew when he said. So he's saying that you will be afraid only when you are afraid that you're going to die. So what is more important? Only that fear. That fear is the one that terrorizes you. So he, at this point, he remembers what Roosevelt had said. Who is Roosevelt? He was the American president. All we have to fear is fear itself. So this Roosevelt had said, all we have to fear is fear itself. What does it mean? We have to be frightened of fear, because once you have fear, then it will disable you and it will not help you do anything at all in life. So you have to fear fear. Only if you conquer the fear, you will be able to move forward. Because I had experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear it can produce, the will to live somehow grew in intensity. So he's saying that because I had experienced both, that is the fear and the sensation of dying, especially because of the misadventure, he says. So he says that this sentence had a deep meaning for him, and he had a great desire to overcome this fear. So that's why his will to live and overcome his fear kept on increasing, and finally he was able to conquer the fear of water. At last I felt released, free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside fear. And so he's saying finally he felt release. That means he was free. Free from what? Free from the fear. And so he was free to walk any trials. Trials means any routes, any roads. So he could go anywhere. He could climb any peak and he could easily brush aside fear. What is brush aside fear? Remove fear from his mind, because he was able to totally overpower the fear that was there in his mind. And so he had conquered the fear that he had. So William Douglas, the narrator, has given a personal experience of a misadventure and what effect it had caused on him and how he was able to overcome it. I hope you liked this video. For more interesting videos, do subscribe to my CBSE English teacher. Like, share and give your valuable comments below. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.